One, but there's still three. Hello and welcome to round 3 of the Eternal Tournament series. I am Truedawn, joined by LocoPojo, and we have a matchup here between Unearthly and PigNorton.
We have a Rakano deck versus a Combre style. A lot of quick draw units coming down from Unearthly right now. Finest Hour is up, so Unearthly's feeling free to attack here and go ahead and get started on this round 1 of the series.
Unfortunately, we have to go into this game a little bit late due to some technical difficulties, but we didn't miss a whole bunch, just the normal curve from Unearthly and a couple little creatures from PigNorton as we see him Unearthly extend further into the board.
We have even power here, and it looks like Emerald Monument is coming down. Lots and lots of shiny cards here. I think Unearthly is running an entire premium set. That's pretty great.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Yeah, so we have Emerald Monument is available, and Unearthly here deciding between Crown Watch Paladin or a Gem Blade, one of which will give him a little bit more pressure and a few more war cries, and the other of which will give him a unit that he can actually attack with.
Yeah,
probably going to end up being the Gem Blade here.
It's deciding between whether or not you want to extend out your board to have a more profitable attack next turn potentially, or have a profitable attack this turn, because Gem Blade on any one of his creatures allows for that creature to attack.
If he develops Crown Watch Paladin here, it'll be against a harsh rule. It won't necessarily benefit him over much. He might even just not want to play much here, but unfortunately he can't get through this 4/4, so he needs something to play here, and that does run the risk of getting hit by the harsh rule, but there's not much you can do about that here.
What's unfortunate is that these Champions of Glory do not have war cries, so their attacks do not accrue any amount of value other than the actual damage. If this is a situation where they had 3 Rakano Outlaws or other war cry creatures, you can actually justify chump attacking one of them into the board to get the war cry 3 and however much damage.
This is a rough matchup for Rakano in general, since you have the Combre healers into either the Parliaments or the Sandstorm Titans, both of which represent pretty significant threats. Unearthly's deck can run, of course, Finest Hours and Vanquishes to get through these threats, but at the moment he's a little bit stuck and needs to continue to play out cards.
What's interesting is PigNorton's deck is actually a more Vodkin-centric Combre deck. It does not have any Sandstorm Titans. He is running 4 Iron Thorn, 4 Mystic Ascendant, 4 Privilege of Rank to go with his 3 Mystics, or Voice of the Speaker, I apologize, and his Vodkin Temple Speakers. So he is looking to get to Vodkin and then draw a large portion of his deck.
Unearthly's deck, in the meantime, is plate focused. We have a pretty significant late game plan, which should be very helpful here. If Unearthly can pressure enough damage early to make sure that that plate swings in for close to lethal or presents a large enough threat. 3 blockers here on the 4/4. PigNorton clearly fearing a Finest Hour, although I'm not sure if he needs to block with all 3 to prevent the 1 card in Unearthly's hand from killing him.
So, but that's actually a spot where I would have liked to see Unearthly Alpha, possibly, because these Champions of Glory are just colded. They're not going to do anything for the rest of this game, and you have to convert them into some manner of value, and the way you do that is by going wide around your opponent and getting some kind of profitable attack. But this tagging alone with this Outlaw, it could just get double blocked, or you can even take the 5. I guess actually in that spot, the Alpha wouldn't have been more profitable. He just would have let it through. Yeah, so it's a weird spot. Unearthly is not really going to be able to attack with a lot of his creatures from this point forward.
It's a pretty difficult situation. There's just too many good blockers on the board, and PigNorton's continuing to play out more. He hasn't had to play his harsh rules at all. He's currently keeping control of the board, and while Unearthly's board is getting more and more threatening, it's mostly Deep Forge Plate that he needs, or other big cards that allow him to go deeper. A 5/5 here attacking can threaten quite a bit of stuff. PigNorton choosing to go for the triple block, which is the correct play. The 5 damage here can only kill one of the big threats, and that's not enough to prevent it from dying, so Unearthly just trades here.
It's also interesting to see that Unearthly does not have any copies of Righteous Fury in his deck, as has been traditional for quite a long time, because you often get to situations like Unearthly is in, where the board is stalled and you need to go over the top of it somehow, and Righteous Fury plus Plate is the way you did that. Just Plate alone may not be enough, even if you top decks it.
Yeah, we have Shogun's Scepter, which will bring any one unit up to large enough to actually deal. Silverwing Familiar seems the obvious choice since it has the Aegis and also only has to deal with the 4/4 flyer. So unless PigNorton has some sort of removal card, uh, preferably two of them, it's not going to be very good news for him. And there's
And
now an awful lot of pressure on this board.
yeah, and Unearthly actually has his best threat in Silver Familiar because PigNorton's more Vodafone Central deck has caught a lot of interaction for the combo pieces. So he doesn't really have any ways to deal with this Silvering Familiar other than providing a bunch of owls to block it or double Desert Marshal. So if Unearthly can actually put on some pressure and PigNorton's unable to enact his big end game and draw a large portion of his deck and go over the top, Unearthly might be able to pull this game out.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, he could actually attack all in. He'd reduce his opponent to 1, assuming no tricks, which wouldn't be particularly good for PigNorton, especially since he'd lose some units in the trade. Um, but he might just choose to attack with his 6/5 and pressure with just that. Uh, Unearthly looking over his options. Silverwing Familiar is, of course, a really, really good card here. Any additional Aegis units that he can play represent even more threats.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if PigNorton does anything to deal with this. He does choose to chump block here, saving himself some life, but he is going to need to deal with these. The two Silver Familiars by themselves are not lethal next turn, but he needs to play something to start getting forward progress to get towards the end game that allows him to kill his opponent, essentially.
Yeah. Okay, Martial Iron Throne's not going to do it. So at this point, uh, you now have to worry about not only the Silverwing Familiars, but the possibility of Unearthly drawing a torch. So even with that, I think there's only 5 blockers. Attacking with everything doesn't quite work since it's 5 against 5,
Yeah, he
but
can only
Unearthly
put
can at
Pig to
least push 8.
1.
Yeah, if he had attacked with everything last turn, he would have lethal this turn. And I think that, like, essentially that would basically make the Silverwing Familiars mostly impossible to answer since PigNorton would only had 6 power. As it is, Unearthly's still going to seal this game. It seems very unlikely that PigNorton can answer all of the threats in the
Yeah,
amount of time that he has left.
he will have 3 lethal flyers. So PigNorton, I guess, could have 2 Great Parliaments, which would make 4 owls. But
Yep, or
we'll
power
see
and
what happens.
so we have to see several responses here, mainly large ones. Parliament or Harsh Rule, Seraph's definitely not going to do it. So District Infantry, even
I think
not a great hit pickup.
unless they patch Seraph so she could take Great Parliament, I don't think any hit was available there would have done anything.
Yep.
So
All right.
we'll be moving to game 2 between these two decks. And PigNorton is actually going to remain pretty vulnerable to those Silver Familiars going post board. He does not have any access to Scorpion Wasps.
Can I say that I love the official name of this deck, which is "What if we rode the familiars"?
It is
Uh,
a very good card.
all right, so Unearthly making sure that he has 3 Soulfire Drakes in the deck. Those cards are not typically very good against the Cambrai Desert Marshal, but they certainly press a lot of air damage and can be very, very threatening in their own right, especially if they get Work Rise on them. I think I like this particular setup, pushing the late game deep damage cards as much as he can. We have a Crown Watch Cavalry potentially coming out. He's currently just looking at all of his options and getting rid of as many as he can. 3 Protects gone. Uh, Lots of interesting choices from an Earthly side.
I think the way you're going to win the game most often as an Earthly is an unchecked flyer, mainly Silverwing Familiar. So I would sideboard giving you enough, like high enough of those, be it Soulfire Drake, Valkyrie, and also things to make them large, like Hammer of Might and Deforged Plate. I would anticipate a game plan facilitating that.
Cutting the swords down tremendously. I think that's a pretty wise choice against Cambrai Healer and Seraph and all of the big Cambrai threats. There's just not that many things that Sword of Ikaria can hit, even though it is a nice answer to big threats. And getting a Warcry and spending another card isn't really the worst thing that you can do with a turn. However, there's just too many good big cards for Unearthly to push through with, so we'll see what ends up coming in.
Yeah, PigNorton's definitely going to need to just go full throttle here. He doesn't really have anything in his sideboard to help his deck speed. He does have 4 Vanquishes, which I anticipate he will bring in here, as well as 4 Copperhall Bailiff and 4 Valkyrie. I imagine some combination of those come in, but again, his deck is very focused on enacting this very linear game plan. So anything he's siding out for those cards will erode his main strategy. So I'm interested to see what he chooses to take out, if anything.
It's one of the difficulties of a Vodacan deck is that you have to side out so many good cards for the Vodacan that if Vodacan doesn't end up being a useful card in the matchup, then it's not really very good for you. Like PigNorton's Combre Vodacombo deck does actually have enough stuff that he could even like actually side out the Vodacans and just
Yeah,
run all of his gas, but it's really dependent on what he wants to see here.
I could definitely see a world where you take out the like voices, Vodakins, and some number of privilege rank for the Bailiff, Vanquish, and Valkyrie Enforcer, and the Obelisk. Actually, it looks like with the Zenith Obelisk in the sideboard, I'm pretty sure that's like his plan. I think he has a transformational sideboard, or at least he could if he wanted to.
Yep. It's not that big of a transformation, but it's definitely a pretty useful one. And if you're siding in a bunch of silences against Vodacan or a bunch of answers to Vodacan, it's possible that those enforcers and bailiffs and obelisks could really see some play. We have like basically 4, 4, 4, and 3 from PigNorton. So
You gotta respect, getting the primal mana when he knows he doesn't need either side anyway.
Yeah, that's pretty adorable. He does need the double red. Yeah, he's clearly signaling that he has like additional power in his hands. That does give his opponent some information, but it's a cute play, and potentially is going to distract PigNorton as he takes a long look at Unearthly's sideboard.
And we do see the Silver Familiar coming down on turn 3. It is the most potent threat for Unearthly in this matchup. He does the option of Crown Watching at this turn, which you do see him elect to do. So while it's a little bit of an anemic threat just right now, just a 3/3, it's very hard to deal with. Like PigNorton will need a Parliament to block this, or need to start enacting his late game to get to a point where the damage doesn't matter, or he can crack back for enough damage.
Yeah, a parliament is not even enough. With a finest hour in the hand, Unearthly's going to be free to attack the Silvering Familiar and continue to gain health for the next couple of turns. PigNorton's going to need some sort of actual answer, including options like Desert Marshal or eventually Vanquish, although currently not Vanquish.
Yeah, and also worth noting, PigNorton's build does not run Harsh Rule in main or sideboard. It's something I've advocated for in Voda Combo. I think if the deck is functioning properly, you don't want to be taking out your own game plan. But he is paying a cost for it here in this matchup that is trying to kill him with all of these small creatures.
Yeah, there's no harsh rule and there is no sandstorm titan. So really these big flyers are actually really quite difficult to deal with, and there's a deep forge plate for the Silvering Familiar, making it a really rough time for PigNorton.
Yeah,
I think there's just not enough sideboard answers to threats like this.
no,
Like
this is just the
overall,
characteristic
it's just-
weakness of Voda Combo. In order to enact your game plan, you need to make concessions to certain game plans, and this is one of them. If you're not very equipped to deal with flyers. Although we may see a Desert Marshal into a Vanquish, or a Desert Marshal, and it is the Vanquish here, so that takes off a lot of the pressure. It's just this 3/3 now, so maybe PigNorton can buy himself enough time to get to a Vodakin, draw most of his deck, Parliament for a lot, and stabilize the game.
Yep, Unearthly can choose to block here to counteract the Martial Ironthorn. If he does that, then that'll set up a little bit. He could also block the Seraph and only spend a Finest Hour on that, but he'll lose some actual aggression here, which could potentially end the threat overall. So it's a question of how scared he is of Seraph. Seraph can certainly generate answers to the 3/3 flyer, so that might be something worth killing. And Ironthorn, of course, is scary as well, but neither one may be worth spending a Finest Hour on when Finest Hour can secure your lethal one turn earlier.
I think you definitely kill one of the two creatures here, because the Finest Hour is only good on your like Silver Familiar, but next turn is 8 mana, and the only way the pump on the Silver Familiar is going to matter is against Great Parliament tokens. And if he plays Parliament next turn, he'll have 2. So the Finest Hour doesn't actually really help there. So I think that it's definitely worth killing one of the two. I would go toward Seraph, but he elects to just take the damage here. We'll see if that ends up coming back to bite him, having both of these big practical threats in play, or whether he's able to convert this pump spell into lethal damage.
Yeah, we might have differing opinions on this one. I definitely think that like the overall damage pressure might be more important. Unearthly wants to kill PigNorton before the Vodafone combo happens, and he's got enough health right now that he's not worried about the actual aggression.
The finest hour
It's
does make it
more,
a 2-turn clock, which is worth noting.
yep, yeah, it's pretty scary for PigNorton at this point, but with the ninth power and there's the Parliament. Now the finest hour, not as good, does allow him to get through 144, but he's still got to find a vanquish or some other answer. And this is suddenly back in PigNorton's favor. The Silverwing Familiar is the only good answer, and he can't even attack with it because a double block from the Parliament, uh, well, actually won't kill the Familiar, but it will be a big enough threat that he's probably not going to want to signal that he has it.
He would be left with the 4/4 against the 3/3, so it's the same spot next turn. And this is the thing that Vodafone does very well. This deck turns the corner incredibly quickly. Once they stabilize the game, if they are able to play a Vodafone or a Mystic Ascendant with the Iron Thorn, oh, we see a Karya off of the Seraph activation, and that'll turn the corner very quickly.
That's probably the best Seraph activation that you can get. There's a couple of good ones, but Ikaria as a 10/10 that also gives you a 5/5 bonus is, I think, stat for stat, the most value that you can possibly get. It gets you an attacker, it gets you a blocker, it gets you 10 points of damage, it gets you 15 power. Sorry, is that 30 power worth of stats? 30 power worth of stats. Just a really, really brutal swing, and definitely enough to stall the Rakano deck and finish off the game.
Yeah, that was pretty brutal. I think that Pig was in a pretty good spot to stabilize the game even without that, like the top 5% Seraph hit. But that is definitely one way to close out a game.
30 points of stats, 10 damage, and a flying blocker. Just way too much. What a Seraph hit. That is sort of the one lucky hit that you really do not want to see, especially when you're already falling behind. So, Unearthly, considering his sideboard, you might not have to make that many changes here. There was a definite element of luck there that happened, and overall, it's mostly just making sure that he has the right tools to deal with Parliament, which I believe he's already sided in.
Yeah, you just need to try and get underneath the Vodafone deck. Try and get enough damage through where your Silverwings can finish it off and just have enough removal to deal with any flying blockers. I think he's already set up well. You don't want to be too reactionary because you just lost to Giant Ikaria. I think you're in a fine spot. I think you did okay. So we'll probably still moving to game 3 soon.
He is cutting in the Soul Fairy Drakes here, which I think is a very fine idea. They are vulnerable to Desert Marshal, but they're like, even if they have War Cries on them, then even then Desert Marshal isn't quite it's still a pretty even trade. And if he can force more Desert Marshals out, that just removes one more possible way that the Vodafone deck can somehow disable his flying threats. So the more flying threats he's playing, the less capable PigNorton is of dealing with them. I think that this 3 Soulfire Drake side-in is a very good idea.
Definitely. And we did see him shaving torches to do that. We talked about that earlier, where if Torch only can really go face in the matchup, you generally don't want it. PigNorton is not presenting many good Torch targets. He does have potentially Awakened Student and Desert Marshal, but in general, there's not a lot else. All the important cards are out of Torch range, so Unearthly wants to bring in more potent things in place of that.
Yeah, it can be helpful in Rakano on account of your quick draw units. Outlaw and Champion of Glory can both kill things like Seraph or Iron Thorn or Combre Healer with a torch and get you some actual value out of that torch. So I think that in general, it's just not as good as Soulfire Drake here, though. That extra aggression in the late game is going to be really, really important for him.
Definitely. And we see players moving into the game now. We're going to probably see this Rakano Outlaw on too, which is really pretty good pressure. And we see styling. Yeah, love it.
So
we'll see if
Smuggler Stash.
We'll see if PigNorton has a Desert Marshal here, and he's not going to because he has double time. He will spend a turn finding the way. So Unearthly's going to get to some damage in, get the War Cry train rolling, and we do see him elect to play a Naked Valkyrie here just to get a 3/3 flyer in play, which you do like. He just needs to put the PigNorton under clock.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we have double time from Norton, and from here I think we're looking at a pretty slow hand. If Norton doesn't have the necessary power to make things work, and he's kind of got like a long pause here, which is maybe indicating that there might be some significant problems on his end. Okay, good. We've got Justice, and there is the Knight Chancellor Seraph. Unearthly drawing his first Deep Forge Plate with a War Cry on it, so already into decent threats.
Yeah, and we see him like just shove all in here, just put the other 3/3 in play, get him to a spot where this plate's going to come down next turn, dealing 12 damage, put PigNorton dead the following turn, force him to have something.
Silence the Seraph, not dealing with those shenanigans again. Looks like Vanquish for the 4/4 would be a good option. Deep Forge Plate works just as well, although it does make it so that he can't attack with the other 3/3.
Vanquishing the 4/4 is better against an opposing Vanquish because you get 6 damage in without making yourself vulnerable to a Vanquish.
I think I like.
Is to do it next turn.
I do think I like this Deep Forge Plate on the Rakano Outlaw. Quick Draw plus Overwhelm is a real tough thing to beat. Obviously, if this gets silenced or vanquished, that's rough, but that means that Unearthly manages to keep both of his 3/3 flyers, so he'll be able to pressure more with Vanquish.
Yeah, this is definitely the right way to do this because that Rakano Outlaw is going to be useless otherwise if you put the plate on one of the flyers. But this way, the plate makes the Outlaw a good attacker, and the next turn the Vanquish will make the 2 flyers good attackers. So all of his creatures will be able to convert into damage.
Yep. So we have the Vanquish, but now Unearthly's putting PigNorton on 6, unless something really special happens here.
You could have a Desert Marshal.
A tricky time.
A Desert Marshal would be excellent here, having one of the Valkyries run into the Seraph, only taking 3 this turn.
That will be a pretty solid choice. And yep, looks like there is a Desert Marshal here. So that's 1 flyer gone and 1 Desert Marshal out of PigNorton's deck. And that's important to keep track of because there's still Soulfire Drakes and Silverwing Familiars, and if Unearthly draws a Soulfire Drake, that could end up being game if all of the Desert Marshals are gone from Norton's hand.
Yep. And PigNorton's moving into the stage of the game where he's like kind of stabilizing. He has a bunch of cards in hand. He can start to get to his end game. Unearthly only has the 1/3/3 flyer, which is a 3-turn clock that has to be dealt with. But PigNorton has some time to do what he wants to do.
Yeah, he needs those Parliaments for sure. Those are a really critical card. They're taking the place of Sandstorm Titan for the big flying blocker, and the more of them that he can play and the more power that he can play them at, the better off he is. 1 health gained here actually does set his clock a little bit higher, so it's now a 4-turn clock. Temple Scribe doing work there. And with Combre Healer, that makes it a 5. Now we're actually looking at a pretty significant threat.
But here comes the Crown Watch Paladin, although it's still a 3-turn clock with the 6 to divided by 13. So he has 2 more turns to find some answer to this Valkyrie.
Only point of health that's going to matter is that last one. If PigNorton
MVP
has
Temple
a Vanquish here, really good. If he has any sort of removal, that would be pretty nice.
Yeah, even Desert Marshal is fine here. It allows the small creatures to either chump block or can gang block the 6/6. So that he's looking for Parliament, Desert Marshal, Vanquish. He has a bunch of live draws here, or even some of his like Mystic Ascendant could draw to some of those. There is Parliament, although it's only 1 flyer, so that doesn't really do a lot right now.
Yeah, a 4/4 blocker, he might actually have to throw it away in front of the 6/6. He's going to hover over Diplomatic Seal to threaten that Torch for lethal. I like that, like, just sort of little bit of psych out there. We're going to see if he can force PigNorton to block. Regardless, I think that PigNorton might want to take this block anyways because the top deck Torch threat is pretty real, even though there's only, I think, 1 Torch in Unearthly's deck.
It was interesting to see essentially trading that Great Parliament for 6 life. I would like to see him make some forward progress turn, and we do see that Valkyrie Enforcer come down. And it looks like PigNorton didn't enact the game sidebar plan we were talking about. We probably cited out the Vodakins, the voice of speakers, and stuff like that, and possibly the privileges of rank for all these more mid-range interactive cards.
Yeah, it's now a race to see who draws their important pieces first. Mystic Ascendant is going to put PigNorton a little bit ahead in this race because he's very high on tempo. But if Unearthly can hit a Deep Forge Plate, I'm not sure if it's going to be enough. It'll be pretty close, though.
Deep Forge Plate on one of the Outlaws is incredibly powerful. It's very hard to block that down in a profitable way. So PigNorton is going to still be vulnerable to that for a few turns, but this Mystic Ascendant getting big enough will help prevent that from being a good top deck. So he only has a couple turns.
In addition, the pressure is on from the 3/3. PigNorton is attacking with the 3/3, which does render him somewhat vulnerable to
That's a little ambitious.
Soulfire Drake. But if he's got the Desert Marshal in hand, he's probably not too worried about that.
Yeah, I would anticipate that's the case. I don't think you like make yourself vulnerable to that. It would only put you to 2. You know, it hasn't gotten Warcried. He's already drawn the cards he's Warcried. So you're not like super vulnerable to it, but I think it's needlessly careless unless you have a Desert Marshal.
Yeah, Unearthly is now flooding, or as much as flooding is for Rakano. You definitely don't want to have this much power in a Rakano deck, but obviously this is something that can happen. And I think from here, it looks like PigNorton's going to be taking the game off of the back of these double Mystic Ascendants. All of that pressure, really, really scary. I'm not sure if I completely agree with this attack, since Deep Forge Blade is still a possibility, but I think it's close enough to lethal that like there's definitely going to be a pretty big threat.
It's interesting to see the Outlaws chump block. Actually, no, that's correct. You want the bigger creature to have the plate on it, but he wouldn't die to plate because it's what, 9, 10, 12. Yeah, he has enough points of toughness on the swing back.
Oni Ronin looks like it might be the game. Unearthly doesn't have his own harsh rules or anything like that. And barring that surprise smuggler stash, I don't think he's going to be any higher on gas.
Oh, and he did have the Desert Marshal insulate himself from both Soulfire Drake and Deep Forge Plate, taking with the Overwhelm too, in
Popping
fact.
both of them out so that he can all in for lethal.
So his attacks were actually very safe.
Yep. Very, very safe attacks. Mystic Ascendant drawing him tons and tons of cards. This game's pretty well over. I believe that there's no way that Unearthly can recover, even from this initial attack, if PigNorton just ace bases.
Yeah, both of these Mystics have to be demanded to be blocked. They're both lethal, and I think the combination of everything else is lethal.
Yep, that is enough. That's the reason to drop the Desert Marshals, that you have just enough for actual lethal. And from here, we see blocks on most things, and that's still 8 damage. So there we go. PigNorton did calculate those Desert Marshals exactly correct. There's a risk, of course, of a torch, but he assumed that it wasn't there because there was no response. There was no fast spell window, and correctly timed that game and set up the 2-1.
Yep, we saw that the Silver Familiars were able to take the first match, but past that point, game 2 was pretty close. The Silver Wings almost got there, but the Ikaria coming down, shutting it out. But even without the Ikaria off the Seraph, PigNorton got to a point where he stabilized the game pretty well. And we are going to be moving to a backup match between Toth and Mulligan.
Yep. Yeah,
Toth leads in game 2. It's 1-0 him.
Yeah, Toth is currently looking at a Seraph activation, which he decides to attack instead. That is a really aggressive play. I kind of like it. What we're seeing here is he's trying to force the 3/3 to block, since
This
basically
is so ambitious.
I think this is 100% right. If he forces the Argenport Instigator to block, then there's suddenly many fewer answers for Mulligan, and that means that Mulligan can basically only rally to win this game. Is this game 2?
Yes, this is game 2, but I don't think the Argenport needed to block. Because I guess if the Argenport blocks, it's a good attack, but I think you could just go to 2. I guess it's not. I think it's still an ambitious attack. That doesn't mean it's wrong. It's definitely risky.
All right. If Toth attacks here, he wins.
Yeah, it's actually just lethal because of the Argenport not being a friend.
There's no way in which he can lose this game at this point, as long as he notices and does the attack correctly. But it looks like it's just an ace base for a victory here, and then we'll move into game 3. If
Toth does have to see it first. He has to, because it's not like apparent. He has to notice that the Seraph demands a block. And then, actually, he can block. No, yeah, it is. It's lethal regardless. But he see that he's going to miss it here and just activate the Seraph. So that's why we play the games.
Yeah, swing for 4 here. And now there are some outs for Mulligan. Rally, I think, is the primary one.
Rapid Shot also does it. Torch does it as well. So Bandit Queen, a lot of things.
Yeah, so doesn't look like Mulligan has it, judging from this pause. I think we'd see an all-in. Torch does not actually do it since Protect is there, but
that is correct.
Looks like it does. Yeah, I think that it looks like the game is over for Mulligan regardless. The Great Parliament is going to take it next turn, unless Mulligan has a correct answer to the current threats.
This could just be a Super 6 slow roll.
Oh, this is actually game 3. So this one is for all the marbles, and it looks like Mulligan is going to probably not be walking.
It was the sickest slow roll, but he has the Protect.
Oh no, Protect, just not quite there. Obliterate into Toss, Protect, and Mulligan goes down. I mean, after that slow roll, I don't feel too bad for him.
That's it. That's one of those things where like seeing it in like the whole time, knowing that they had to protect the whole time. It's just you'd like to think that like justice would have just put the protect there magically, but we saw it there the whole time when you're on
Yep.
that end of it.
So yeah, tough considerations there. Doesn't there wasn't really any way that Mulligan could have played out of that. If there were other options, I think they would have been worth considering. But nothing there really quite functions as well as just obliterating your opponent's face. And it looks like Toth's going to walk away from that one intact. So that is the game for those ones. I think that's the last of our backup matches, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. So we will be moving into round 4 soon. And we will see you guys then.